afternoon, everyone. This is Judge Lopez. Today is March 16th. I'm going to call the 230 case jointly administered under 23-90116 Diamond Sports Group, LLC, here on first day motions. Hope everyone's doing okay. The line is completely muted at this time. I believe debtor's counsel is unmuted, at least some of them. I'm going to go ahead and start with appearances from debtor's counsel. I'm going to call out a group to see if we can do this in an organized fashion. If I unmute your line, I'm going to ask that you please just make your appearance and then mute your line. I'll keep your line unmuted throughout the hearing, but I'm going to ask everyone to please kind of monitor your own personal phone there or your line. So with that, let me get started. Anyone from debtor's counsel line unmuted at this time?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Brian Herman from Paul Weiss, Ripken, Wharton, and Garrison on behalf of the debtors. It's nice to see you, and thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. I am joined by a number of my colleagues who will present today, as well as our co-counsel at Wilmer Hale, Mr. Andy Goldman, who will also present today, and our Texas co-counsel at Porter Hedges, Mr. Higgins.
Okay. If there are anyone who's going to present today from the debtor's side, why don't you just hit 5-star now and let me unmute your line.
Your Honor, we're all in the same room.
That makes my life easier. I appreciate it. I'd also note for everyone who is appealing as well in this case, if you go to my personal site in the Southern District of Texas, you'll see click here to make an electronic appearance, and there is a link for this case. So if you just want to make an electronic appearance, that is more than just fine. Okay, so let me then turn and start unmuting. I'm muting a 917-414 number.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. It's Scott Greenberg, Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher, on behalf of a group of lenders holding first lien claims and second lien claims, or I think we've captioned it the ad hoc secured lender group. And I'm joined by partner Jason Goldstein, who should also be on the video.
Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Greenberg. Okay, let's see where I go next. There's a 212715 number.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Can you hear me?
Just fine. Good afternoon.
Hi, this is Daniel Eggerman from Kramer Levin. I'm assuming you're calling my number. We represent a group, an ad hoc group of first lien lenders. I'm joined by my colleagues Alexander Wolverton and Jennifer Charette, as well as co-counsel Ashley Harper from the Hunt & Mangers Kurth firm.
Okay, good afternoon. Okay, there's another 212 number. I'm unmuting your line. Okay, there's a 212-558 number.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. This is James Bromley of Sullivan & Cromwell, appearing on behalf of the Office of the Commissioner of Major League Baseball and 14 constituent clubs.
Okay, good afternoon, sir. Let's see where we go next. Here's a 713 number, Houston number, 857.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. This is Bruce Rosinski with the Jackson Walker firm, appearing on behalf of the National Basketball Association and its affiliates, including member teams that are parties to telecast agreements with the debtors. And with me virtually is my co-counsel, Vincent Indelicato at the Proskauer Rose firm.
Okay, good afternoon. Okay, there's a 202 number, 590.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Howard for the U.S. trustee.
All right, I got the trustee early. Good, I'm glad I got you in. Good afternoon, Mr. Wen. All righty, here's a 929 number.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Alexander Wolverton from Kramer 11. Mr. Eggerman already made his appearance on my behalf.
Great. Good afternoon, Mr. Wolverton. 713547 number.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Kelly Norfleet from Haynes & Boone on behalf of the National Hockey League. I'm joined on the phone by our co-counsel, Shauna Elberg from Skadden Arps. I believe she's also pressed 5-star. She will get to her line in the roll call.
Okay. Good afternoon. And again, you can make your appearance now, or you can reserve it until the appropriate time. And you can also make an electronic appearance as well. 312 number.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. David Seligman from Kirkland & Ellis on behalf of Sinclair Broadcasting.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Seligman. Okay. I think I'm going to quit while I'm ahead and then search it again. Let me turn things over to, let's see. Yeah. I'm going to turn it over to the debtors at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, for the record, Brian Herman from Paul Weiss on behalf of the debtors. Your Honor, we have a presentation that we'd like to share at the outset to introduce the court to who we are, why we're here, and where we're going with the case. And if we could put the presentation on screen, I think it would be helpful. And we have a presentation box on the screen. If we can share the screen with that box, we can pop up the presentation.
I don't know whose idea it was, but it was a really smart one. It was easy to find, so much appreciated.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, I have made, all right.
Great, thank you. So, Your Honor, I want to start by first introducing two of the company's executives who are in the virtual courtroom today. First, Mr. David Preschlack, who is our CEO and is also a member of our board of directors. Second, and Mr. Preschlack is on the video screen. Mm-hmm. Second is Mr. David DeVoe, who is with us in the conference room. Mr. DeVoe is the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer of the company, and he is also the first state declarant.
Okay.
We're struggling to get the presentation up, but I'll continue with the introductions. So, Your Honor, as I mentioned, our co-counsel is with us, Mr. Goldman and his colleagues from Wilmer, who is proposed special corporate and litigation counsel. Porter Hedges, our proposed Texas counsel. Moelis and Company is our one of our two proposed investment bankers. Lion Tree is the other proposed investment banking firm. And we also have Alex Partners, which is our financial advisor. Your Honor, in addition to the debtors, we obviously, and you've heard some of the appearances, we've got a few organized creditor groups that I'd like to introduce. First, we have an ad hoc first lien group that is represented by Kramer Levin and Centerview Partners as their investment banker, and that group owns north of 50% of the first lien, and that is the group that we principally negotiated our consensual use of cash collateral with. We also have an ad hoc secured lender group or a second lien lender group that is represented by Mr. Greenberg at Gibson Dunn and Evercore as their investment banker. And then we have what we call our ad hoc crossover group, which is a group that holds instruments across the capital structure, but principally is a large unsecured creditor group. And that group is represented by Paul Hastings and PJT Partners as their investment banker. In addition, Your Honor, you heard from Kirkland & Ellis, which represents Sinclair Broadcasting. Sinclair, in addition to being our parent company and the 100% owner of all of the equity in the company, is also our receivables facility lender. We do not have before you today a motion to approve our continued receivables facility borrowing arrangement with Sinclair. We hope to be able to bring that before Your Honor probably in advance of the second day hearing, but we'll come back to you and seek a date if we need one in advance of the second day hearing. But that is a facility that is provided by Sinclair, through which they, through a special purpose vehicle that we set up, purchase our receivables and advance against them for liquidity purposes. If you go to the next slide, we also have, and you've heard from some of the attorneys today, we have among our key stakeholders 3 leagues: baseball, basketball, and hockey. We have a number of teams within those leagues that we do business with and broadcast games for, including 14 Major League Baseball teams, 16 basketball teams, and 12 hockey teams. And then we have our distribution partners who we sell the broadcast through to reach the customers, the fans. And those are both our MVPD partners and our VMVPD partners. I will readily admit, Your Honor, that I had never heard the term MVPD before, but it is a widely used term in this business, and it means multi-channel video programming distributors. We would call them cable companies in our regular parlance, but these are the folks that bundle a bunch of channels, including ours, into a package and distribute it to customers through cable or satellite TV. And then we have our VMVPD partners, which are virtual MVPDs, which people will refer to as coming over the top, which through mobile devices and the like, and we have contracts with DirecTV and Fubo, among others. Last but certainly not least, Your Honor, among the key stakeholders, maybe the most important, are our fans. As you well know, Your Honor, I think you're a avid sports fan, and a Yankees fan, as I understand it. We have many millions of fans, 40.6 million subscribers to be precise, who rely on us to broadcast their games locally in their markets. And as I'll show you in a bit on a map, our reach is vast. We cover 70% of total U.S. households through 87 broadcast markets, and there are a lot of eyes, let's just say, on the product that we provide. Flip to the next slide. Before I get into who we are in further detail, Your Honor, I just want to choreograph a bit how I think the order of the presentations will go. After I speak, Mr. Goldman will have some brief remarks, so I'll turn the podium over to him, if that's okay. And then, as I understand it, there are a number of parties who would like to speak following the debtor with brief opening remarks, mostly in support. There may be a few who may have other things to say that perhaps are not necessarily against us, but maybe not quite as supportive as some of the parties. But I think if we can have the supporting parties go after us, I think that would be everybody's preference, if that's okay with you, Your Honor.
That makes sense.
Okay, great. Going to the next slide. In terms of an overview of the company, Your Honor, we operate what are called regional sports networks, and what those are sports networks that broadcast games locally. So we are not ESPN, we are not ABC, but we broadcast the games into the markets where the people live who like to watch these games. If you think of our market here in New York, it's the equivalent of Sports New York's SNY or Yes Network, which carries the Yankees and the Nets. And these regional sports networks operate for us under the Bally Sports brand. The Bally RSNs, as I said, broadcast Major League Baseball games for 14 teams, basketball games, professional basketball games for 16 teams, and then hockey games for 12 teams, comprising 42 total professional sports teams across the 3 leagues. Diamond also owns, through partnership with owners of Marquee and the Yes Network, a 50% interest in Marquee, which broadcasts the Cubs in baseball, and 20% of the Yes Network, which, as I'm sure you know, broadcasts the Yankees and the Brooklyn Nets. If you go to the next slide, you can see the reach of our company is vast. We span the entire United States where these sports are played. We're on both coasts. We have a vast presence in the South and in the Midwest, and I think basically touch every major sports market in the country. In terms of our history, Your Honor, I won't dwell on all of this, but perhaps some key points. First, these RSNs started life back in 1996 as what I remember is Fox Sports Net, and then evolved into what is now Bally Sports through a series of transactions, the first being Disney's acquisition of Fox, which was announced in December 2017, closed in 2019. But importantly for us, as part of that transaction, the Department of Justice at the time required Disney to divest its RSNs. And so it's through that divestiture that Diamond came into being and was acquired by Sinclair Broadcasting in August 2019 from Disney as part of the divestiture. And Sinclair then took over 100% of the operation of what had been these Fox regional sports networks. Post that acquisition, Your Honor, in March of 2021, Diamond rebranded the RSNs under the Bally Sports name, which they operate under today. Subsequent to that, in March of 2022, Diamond raised new capital of $635 million from a group of first lien lenders, and that money was principally to be used to grow its digital business, which I'll get into in a little bit and why that's important. Also significant, and you'll hear a lot about during my presentation today, in May of 2022, as part of that financing, Diamond's board was reconstituted to include or to be a majority independent board, so that although Sinclair owned 100% of the stock, control was given to independent board members, and those are the board members that continue to run the company today. And then in September of 2022, just to round out the picture on the operations side, Diamond launched what we call Bally Sports Plus, which is our digital business, and you'll hear more about why that digital business is so important in a few minutes. Your Honor, on the next slide, we wanted to point out that while we own 19 RSNs, own and operate 19 RSNs, 13 of those are owned by debtors. 6 of those are owned by joint ventures in which the debtor owns a majority interest, but not all of the joint venture. In those cases, the co-owners are baseball teams, although we own the majority. And then I mentioned the joint venture interest that we have in Marquee and Yes Network. And it's important to note, Your Honor, the joint ventures are not debtors in bankruptcy. The Diamond entities that own the majority interest in the joint ventures are debtors, but the joint ventures themselves are not debtors. If you go to the next slide, this slide just shows which teams are owned by debtor RSNs by league and which teams are owned by the joint ventures that are not debtors in this bankruptcy case. The next slide is our corporate chart. A couple of things that are worth pointing out. First, through the color, different colored boxes, it denotes which are debtors, which are the red boxes, which are joint ventures, which are the blue boxes, and where you could find yes and marquee. Off to the left, those are the green boxes. In addition, the circled box towards the top is the borrower on the funded debt. That's the $8.8 billion approximately of funded debt that the company has, and that's also where the independent board that I mentioned sits. And then we've also included the team logos to make it easy so you can see the different Diamond entities and the different teams that those entities broadcast sports games for. As I said at the outset or earlier, Diamond sells its programming through the MVPDs, or the cable companies, as I call them. Those are referred to in the industry as linear broadcasters, linear being sort of the old line way of distributing these broadcasts. And what these MVPDs do, as I said, is they bundle a bunch of different channels that we're all used to seeing, and then they sell it to the consumer in a bundle. And Diamond has historically generated most of its revenue through these distributors. And as I also mentioned, we are now moving to include virtual MVPD partners as well, as that is the way the world is moving. I can tell you, just as an anecdote, the other night I was trying to watch the UCLA-Arizona game, and unfortunately the Pac-12 network is not part of my bundle, but if I had purchased Fubo TV, I would have been able to watch the Pac-12 network. And so that's the kind of virtual type programming that I think we're ultimately evolving towards, and that's where this business is ultimately going to evolve towards as well. In terms of the digital business, Your Honor, which is where we would like to evolve the business to and have already started, as I mentioned, we launched the digital business in September of 2022 under the Bally Sports Plus brand. And that is really to deal with the reality of the world today, which is that there are two types of people that are moving us away from cable. There are what we call cord cutters, who are stopping their cable subscriptions to get their entertainment through streaming or other means. And then there are cord nevers, like my 21-year-old son, who would never subscribe to cable. He would just watch, whether it's Netflix or Hulu or some subscription service like that. And with respect to sports, he would just go find some way to stream a baseball game or a basketball game and would not bother with a cable subscription. That is the business that we are going to grow into to make up for the loss of the cable customers that I'll get into more detail about in a bit. On the next slide, we have identified the teams for which we have today the digital rights to exploit these broadcasts on the Bally Sports Plus product. We have 5 baseball teams. We have all the NBA teams that we broadcast linearly, and then we have 12 NHL teams, all of the teams that we broadcast linearly for the NHL. The next slide, Your Honor, just summarizes our debt. We have I'll take you through the totals of each. We have about $630 million of first lien debt. We have about $6.5 billion of second lien debt, comprised of both notes and bank debt. We have a small amount of third lien debt that just is a remnant from an exchange transaction that was done last year. We have about $1.7 billion of unsecured notes. And then there is the AR facility I mentioned with Sinclair, which is about $192.5 million. All in, excluding the Sinclair debt, it's about $8.8 billion of debt. So, why are we here? Your Honor, it's basically 2 reasons. One is obvious from the previous slide. We have too much debt. And the good news there is we have an agreement with most of our creditors to eliminate virtually all of it. Second, we pay more for the rights to broadcast the teams than we're able to get from the distributors. And we need to fix that. And we've got some ideas as to how to fix it. But let me just explain what I mean by we pay more than we get from the distributors. As I mentioned, the agreements we have with our MVPD partners is the principal means for which we generate revenue. And we are being hurt, as they are being hurt, by the loss of cable subscribers. Just to point to a couple of statistics, Your Honor, the number of households in the United States that subscribe to MVPDs has gone from 83 million in 2019 when this transaction was when Sinclair acquired Diamond closed to 62 million in 2022, and it's continuing to decline. We have felt that decline. Our own subscribers has declined by about $22 million since 2019. We have also lost carriage or distribution with several of our distributors since the transaction closed. Most impactfully, Dish Network, Hulu Plus, and Sling TV, and that has hurt our ability to generate revenue. And together, those two factors, what we call subscriber churn or loss of subscribers and the loss of distributors, has resulted in about a 24% decline in revenue from 2019 to 2022. On the flip side, Your Honor, most of the rights payments that we make are covered by agreements that were entered into a while ago, in some instances a long time ago. Some of them even still bear the Fox name in the contract, so that tells you how long ago. And they're long-term agreements in many cases. And so we are stuck with a legacy cost structure and a declining revenue structure on the linear side. And to just highlight a few of the key metrics with respect to baseball, the contracts, some of the contracts go out to 2035, and the average remaining length is 6 years. With respect to basketball, some of the contracts go out to 2030 and have an average remaining length of 3 years. And with respect to hockey, also 2030 and an average remaining length of 2 years. So that gives you, I think, a good picture of the cost side and the revenue side. And we need to do something to address that. On the next slide, I want to point out what we have done thus far to address that, and that is to grow our digital business. And to grow our digital business, which is where the world is moving, requires capital. And that capital was scarce for Diamond until our lenders came along, or a group of our lenders came along in March of 2022 and loaned us an additional $635 million in large part, to go build a digital business. Because they too knew that that was the way for Diamond to sort of evolve into the next level. That $635 million of debt was put in at the very top of the capital structure. Those are our first lien lenders. The old first lien lenders at the time exchanged into second lien debt. Those are our second lien lenders. Anyone who didn't participate in the exchange was pushed to the third lien. That's a small amount of third lien debt, so it tells you that there was high participation in the exchange. And then lastly, the unsecured notes were unaffected by this financing. They just remained in place. As I mentioned, a key component of the financing was the lender's desire, if they're going to put the money in, to ensure that Diamond had a majority independent board. And so that, again, although Sinclair owned 100% of the equity, the board would control Diamond and it would be independent, and in that way, the decision-making would be independent. That was very important to the lenders. In fact, it was so important, they made it a covenant of the loan. And what the covenant basically required is that two independent, we call them managers because it's an LLC, but they're essentially the equivalent of board of directors. Two independent managers were selected by the lenders under the first lien credit agreement. One independent manager was mutually selected by the lenders and Sinclair. And then one independent manager was appointed by Sinclair, and then we had the Sinclair CEO, Mr. Chris Ripley. And that's the 5-member board that was put in place as part of the financing in March of 2022, and that is the 5-member board that continues to be in place today. And so with that money, Your Honor, we were able to go to the leagues and negotiate for the right to exploit the teams that we have digitally. We were able to get all the teams, as I said, that we had with the NBA and NHL to give us the right to exploit digitally. We were able to get 5 Major League Baseball teams of the 14, so there's 9 out there that we don't have that we'd like to have, but that was our start. Once we had the financing and the digital rights, we had 2 essential tasks left, substantial to be fair, but 2 remaining tasks left to get us to the other side. One is to launch and grow the DTC business. We launched it in September of last year. It's continuing to grow, and we look forward to its continued growth. And the second was to restructure the balance sheet because we just had too much debt. And those tasks, Your Honor, among many others, fell to Diamond's independent board together with its advisors. And to continue the sequence beyond the March 22 loan, in May of 22, the board was seated, so 4 independents and Mr. Ripley as Sinclair's CEO. The board engaged Paul Weiss as its counsel. In September of 2022, the company engaged Moelis and Liontree to advise on the restructuring and potential strategic transactions. And although we don't have any retention applications up today, nor should we, you might be asking yourself, why 2 investment bankers? And I will tell you, Your Honor, this is a very difficult situation and case. And it's difficult because of the restructuring involved, which is where Moelis has principally taken the lead. And it's difficult in terms of the work we're going to need to do to evolve the business to the digital business, continue, obviously, to exploit the rights linearly, and figure out what strategic investor or what capital we can attract from strategics, and then ultimately what is the exit for the new owners of the business. And there is not an investment bank that is better in this space than Liontree. And that's why we have 2 investment banks. In December of 2022, we formed a conflicts committee of the board to evaluate transactions, historic transactions between Diamond and Sinclair, given that we sort of knew, and our RSA makes it clear, that as part of a restructuring, we were likely to separate from Sinclair, and we needed to have independent board members and independent counsel investigate what transactions had transpired and to negotiate with Sinclair to the extent that we needed to negotiate with them. And so that's why the conflicts committee was formed. And then a subset of that committee, we call it the claims analysis subcommittee, was formed in January 23 to basically take ownership of our claims investigation to see whether there are claims against Sinclair. We don't know sitting here today that there are, but that committee was charged with investigating whether there are, and that committee is advised by Paul Weiss and Alex Partners. I've mentioned a lot about the independent board, Your Honor. I thought I would just explain who the folks are because I think it's important. I will tell you, I'm biased, but I will tell you that this is a stellar board, and I don't think we can get better expertise for this company in this situation than what we have. So who are they? First, our chairman, Randy Freer, who is also a member of the conflicts committee and the claims analysis subcommittee. Mr. Freer used to be the CEO of Hulu. So if anybody understands streaming, he does. and he happens to have been the former president and CEO of the Fox network. And so he knows these RSNs really well because he used to run them when they were part of Fox. David Preschlack, who I introduced at the outset, is our Chief Executive Officer. He's also a member of the board. He was the former president of NBC Sports Regional Networks. NBC has its own regional networks, much like our regional networks, but smaller. Again, if anybody knows this business, he does. Marianne Turk, who comes to us out of the NFL, where she's had senior leadership roles within the National Football League. Bob Wissett, who comes to us from many years spent as the president and general manager of some of the most successful sports teams we've seen, certainly in our life, the Supersonics, the Trailblazers, and the Seahawks. And then Chris Ripley, who I mentioned, is Sinclair's CEO and president. And as I said at the outset of this slide, this is a great board, and we are in really great hands, Your Honor. We also recognize that it's very difficult for a board to run a company day to day. We have a management agreement with Sinclair. You'll hear more about that at a later hearing. It's not for today, but we have a management agreement with Sinclair where they provide a lot of the nuts and bolts day-to-day management of the company, including a lot of back office stuff. But we needed our own executive leadership, and so starting in December of 2022, we embarked to go get that executive leadership. We started with Mr. Preschlack. We asked him to become the CEO. The board asked him to become the CEO. He accepted and is today our CEO. We then found Mr. DeVoe, the first-day declarant, who I mentioned is our Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer. We also recently hired in February Eric Ratchman, who was appointed as our President of Distribution and Business Development. And just earlier this month, we hired Meredith Powers, who is our Chief Human Resources Officer. So we are building our own management team and really positioning Diamond to stand alone post this restructuring, which we're going to have to do. In terms of, Your Honor, what did we do to fix problem number one, which is too much debt? We engaged with our creditors, as one would expect us to do in this situation. Our creditors have been very cooperative, and they have been really side by side with us since the late summer of 2022, which is when restructuring discussions with our organized creditors began. In November of 2022, we asked a number of those creditors to become restricted or sign confidentiality agreements with us so that we could provide them with material non-public information and really engage on the substance of a restructuring. And given that we're sitting here today in March of 2023, these creditors stayed restricted with us for about 5 months, which, as you know from private practice, is virtually unprecedented. So these creditors have really worked with the company to set us up for what we believe will be success. We also, Your Honor, obviously Sinclair owns 100% of the equity. There was going to have to be concessions made by Sinclair, and there were going to be gives and takes between the company and its creditors and Sinclair. That's in part why we formed the Conflicts Committee and the Claims Investigation Committee, but we had Sinclair at the table as well as a participant in the discussions. And then in March of this year, earlier this month, those discussions culminated in a restructuring support agreement that we were able to finalize shortly after the filing with members of the organized creditor groups that hold the second lien and the crossover debt. We had hoped to fold Sinclair into that restructuring support agreement. It didn't happen in time. We and the creditors hope that we can fold them in after we get through our first day hearing and intend to spend time with them to try to do that. but we didn't get to it before the case started. In addition, we worked with Mr. Eggerman's clients, the first lien lenders, on cash collateral use because this company has a lot of cash. We don't need a dip. We don't have a dip. We are blessed with a lot of cash, and that cash is collateral of the first lien lenders, and so we spent time with Mr. Eggerman and his client negotiating consensual use of cash collateral and had very constructive discussions, which led to our fully consensual cash collateral order that we're presenting today. In addition, Your Honor, we engaged, as you'd expect, with our league and team partners because at the end of the day, we're broadcasting games for professional sports teams and leagues, and we need their cooperation. So we engaged with all three leagues at the league level as well as some of the individual teams, so Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL. We had very constructive discussions with the NBA and the NHL, and I'm pleased to say have made good progress in negotiations with each, and we are going to continue to work with each of those leagues and their representatives to try to get to an agreement that will allow us to position the company for long-term success. Our dialogue, candidly, with baseball has differed. I'm not going to address that. Mr. Goldman will address that when he gets up. And given, Your Honor, the spirit of the cooperation in which the NBA and the NHL have operated, I want to be clear on the record, so there's no doubt, that we intend to pay NBA and NHL teams what we owe them for broadcast rights at least through the end of the season. Their season is obviously coming to a conclusion, at least the regular season. The playoffs then get broadcast nationally, so we're not involved in that. Obviously, baseball's in a different position with the season about to start. But we do have in our budget ordinary course payments to NBA teams and NHL teams, and I wanted to make it clear that we intend to honor those arrangements at least through the end of this season. And by the way, I don't mean to imply that we're not going to honor them after the end of the season either. I don't mean to imply that we're not going to pay other teams, but I just want to make it clear, because they've been good partners, that we intend to take care of them for this season. And they had asked us to do that, and we were happy to do it. Going to the next slide, Your Honor, with respect to Sinclair, as I said, we knew, or at least suspected, that when we entered into these restructuring discussions, we would need to separate from Sinclair because their equity would either entirely or largely be wiped out. And although they've been good partners in managing the business, they're not a charity, and so we didn't expect them to continue to manage a business that they didn't own. And so we knew that we would need to stand the business up on its own, and we've been doing that. In addition to the management, senior management that I identified, we have been working behind the scenes with Sinclair's cooperation to try to emulate all of the back office things that Sinclair does for us so that we can do them for ourselves, either once we emerge or shortly after we emerge. We also engaged Deloitte in January of 2023 to help us to provide consulting services to help stand the business up. And we've been in regular dialogue with the folks who provide the services from Sinclair so that we know exactly what we will need to be an independent, standalone business when we emerge from Chapter 11. In terms of our investigation, Your Honor, I just wanted to briefly mention what the claims analysis section has been up to. So as I said, we have two board members, Mr. Freer and Ms. Turk, who are on this subcommittee. They oversee Paul Weiss, Porter Hedges, and Alice Partners in conducting this investigation. To date, with Sinclair's cooperation, we have interviewed 9 witnesses and reviewed about 35,000 documents. There'll be many more that I'm sure we will get, and we will continue this work. It's not done, but we will continue to interview witnesses, and we will continue to review documents to see if the company has any claims that would be assets of these estates that would be available for creditors. So how did we get here? Your Honor, we had to make a decision back in February, the first decision point. We had two interest payments totaling $140 million that were due on February 15th for the 30-day grace period, and the board decided prudently not to make the payments. We were negotiating with our creditors. We knew the company was going to need to restructure. Didn't make sense to make the payments. We knew that that was going to start a clock on how long we would have before we would need to file for bankruptcy, but that was a prudent decision, and we did not make those payments in February. In addition, we had a payment due to a baseball team on March 1st, the Arizona Diamondbacks, and we did not make that payment. We entered the grace period with respect to that payment. That grace period expires, I think it's today, March 16th. So the Diamondbacks were not paid. We have otherwise, prior to the petition date, paid every single team that we owed money to. There was one other payment that we missed to for college sports that we broadcast, but other than that, we were current with respect to every single one of our broadcast partners. So, Your Honor, where are we going? Go to the next slide. First, I just want to point to the accomplishments that we've been able to make to date, just to emphasize a few. We obviously have an independent board, senior management team, very happy about the leadership that we have put in place for the company. We have agreements with the NBA and the NHL on streaming digital content for all the teams we carry. We have 5 baseball teams. We'd like to do better, so we'll see what we can do there. We have been, as agreements have come up, we've been negotiating renewals with team partners. Recently, we renewed the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Carolina Hurricanes, and the Los Angeles Clippers, and we'll continue to have those discussions as contracts come up for renewal. As I mentioned, we've been working cooperatively with Sinclair on a separation. We executed our RSA with our key creditors, and we continue to have a very constructive dialogue with the NBA and NHL on additional digital rights. So those are all things that we've got either in the rearview mirror or we are working towards achieving. In terms of our near-term and medium-term goals, we need to reach agreements with our team and league partners on a path forward that includes expanded digital rights. That is important. We have a number of MVPD distribution agreements that will come due in the next 11 months, so we are going to need to renegotiate those deals with our MVPDs that will become up for renewal. We obviously, and I'll get into specific timeline in a second, or at least proposed timeline, we would like to pursue aggressively confirmation of the plan so that the company can emerge expeditiously from bankruptcy. And we will continue to work to separate from Sinclair, which we're going to need to do pursuant to our proposed restructuring. On the next slide, we've included an illustrative timeline. It really contains some of the RSA milestones. I'll go through those in more detail in a minute, but it also overlays the seasons for the different leagues, because those seasons are in part going to drive our timing. Because, for instance, we can't tell a league that is going to start its season in September or October that we'll see in September or October. We're going to have to pull that forward and advance those discussions so that those league partners know that we're there for them when their next season starts. In terms of the next slide, I just wanted to point out my partner, Mr. Parlin, will go into more detail on cash collateral, but as I said, we have a lot of cash. We have about $426 million of cash. You don't see that many debtors with that much cash, so that's a good thing. We don't need DIP financing. We can live on existing cash, and we will continue to generate cash throughout the case. And as I mentioned, we have the consensual use of our cash collateral, so I think we're in pretty good shape in terms of liquidity for the foreseeable future. In terms of the RSA, Your Honor, I just want to give you some of the highlights because I've mentioned it a few times, and I just want to give you the roadmap so that you understand what that document provides for at a high level. It's a framework, and it lays out proposed treatment for the key stakeholders in the capital structure, and it also lays out a timeline. In terms of the treatment of creditors, the RSA proposes that our first lien lenders will be unimpaired, that our second lien lenders and our unsecured creditors will convert all of their debt to equity and warrants, so it's a massive delevering of the capital structure. And then we will separate from Sinclair, whose equity, as I mentioned, will under this plan would get wiped out. And also, as I mentioned, we are continuing to work to fold Sinclair into the RSA, which we hope to be able to do. In terms of milestones, Your Honor, I think every case needs to have some order and some plan, and so our plan is to march to the following schedule. We have committed to our creditors under the RSA that we would get them a business plan by August 1st. Obviously, there's building blocks to that. There's the league negotiations, the team negotiations, there's the MVPD negotiations. All of that fits into the business plan. We would like to file a Chapter 11 plan by September 1st. And then, putting aside some of the interim dates, we have a deadline to go effective by the end of the year. So that's the timeline we'd like to march towards. Obviously, your schedule will be a big determinant in that. I don't mean to suggest that you're bound by this in any way, but that's our goal. Lastly, Your Honor, I just want to leave you with a few key themes, and then I'm going to turn the podium over to Mr. Goldman. And the reason I think these themes are important, in addition to telling you what I think is going to happen here and leaving you with some thoughts and the other parties, this case is widely followed in the press. And some of the press is accurate and some of it isn't. So here's my shot at making sure there's no lack of clarity about where this company is headed. First, Your Honor, I want to make it crystal clear that Diamond is open for business and we're not going anywhere. There's been all kinds of press about Diamond's going under, Diamond's not going to be able to broadcast games. Completely wrong. We're not going anywhere. We have more than enough cash to operate our business for the foreseeable future, and we are going to continue to broadcast games without interruption, and we are absolutely committed to delivering live games to our fans across the country. That's point number one. Point number two, which I think is hopefully evident from the presentation thus far, is that we have made significant progress negotiating a deleveraging transaction with our creditors and a separation from Sinclair. Point number three, in all honesty, work remains to be done. We are not done yet. We obviously, as I said, have discussions that we're going to have with the teams, the leagues, the MVPDs to ensure that we have ongoing partnership, which I'm confident those discussions will be fruitful. And we're going to have additional conversations with Sinclair because we're not done yet regarding the separation and their treatment through all of this. Fourth, I think it's evident, but in case it's not, the RSA provides us with significant support from our creditors and positions the company to move forward expeditiously to complete our restructuring. That was the timeline I just went through. Fifth, Diamond looks forward to emerging from Chapter 11 as a restructured company and one that is well positioned to continue, as we are today, as the leader in regional sports entertainment. Your Honor, this is the largest regional sports network company in the country. No one is even, the number two is not even close. And last but not least, today marks the first important step towards Diamond's next beginning. So, Your Honor, I think we have a great company run by a great board with great senior leadership that has a great product that fans all over the country rely on and enjoy. And we are going to continue to produce that product, restructure this company, and come out the other side as a much healthier, more successful company than we started. With that, Your Honor, I'm going to cede the podium, if it's okay, unless you have any questions for me, to Mr. Goldman.
Okay. Thank you. No questions. Mr. Goldman.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Have I unmuted your line? I just want to make sure. Oh, you're there. Even better. That's perfect.
I'm there, Your Honor.
All righty. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Just a quick clarification. When Mr. Herman says we are open for business, we are open for business, and that includes the broadcasting of any playoff games that we have rights to for our teams with respect to both hockey and basketball for the upcoming playoff run. For the record, Your Honor, Andrew Goldman of Warner, Cutler, Pickering, Hale, and Dorr. We are proposed special corporate and litigation counsel to Diamond. We have been counsel to Diamond since 2020, and since 2022, we have been working closely with Paul Weiss on a coordinated basis with respect to advice and counseling of both the company and, in Paul Weiss's case, the board as well. Among the mandates that we carry out on behalf of Diamond are the dealings with several issues related to Diamond's relationships with both the teams and the leagues. And that's what I'd like to just touch on briefly today. We're not here seeking any relief, but just to set the stage for what may be an important theme throughout the pendency of the case. As Mr. Herman previewed, Diamond's direct-to-consumer initiatives and our growth in direct-to-consumer requires us to have an additional set of rights from the teams and the leagues beyond the rights that we have to carry the traditional linear cable box model. We have, for every NBA and NHL team that we carry linear for, we have digital rights. The NHL deal was done in 2021, and the NBA deal was renewed in January of 2022. As Mr. Herman also noted, our conversations and negotiations with hockey and basketball have been constant, and they have been incredibly productive. Unfortunately, our experience with baseball, not so much. And that is really what I want to focus a couple minutes on, because it does drive a lot of the thinking in the restructuring. We have been in negotiations and in discussions with baseball, both through current and prior management, for several years now, with our primary goal being to be able to access the rights we need to offer the digital product for all 14 of the baseball teams that are in our fold. We have those contractual rights. To date, we've only been able to access those rights for 5 of the 14 teams. For 9 of those teams, we have not, at the direction of the Commissioner's Office, been able to access those rights for reasons which I'll touch on briefly, but obviously dovetail into the Office of Baseball's stated public goal, which they have done so on numerous occasions, that they want to take back those rights, bring them to the home office so that they can monetize them for the teams on a national, unified basis. We have agreements with 14 teams, and our 14 team agreements require that we be entitled to use the digital rights granted under those agreements, so long as baseball has granted them to the teams and under the contracts they have. The only limitation on that is that if baseball believes that we've not paid fair market value, they can step in. And again, while baseball has allowed us to use digital rights for 5 of the 14, it has continuously denied us the rights for those other 9. Of course, there's no serious dispute with respect to whether or not we satisfied baseball's self-imposed requirements in that regard. What the fight has been about, if you want to call it that, certainly the disagreement and the denial by baseball of our continual requests lies in baseball's stated interest in, quote, taking the rights back and going it alone. Over the past 24 months, we have heard continued concerns raised by the Commissioner's Office about Diamond, and we have gone to great strides, as Mr. Herman has said, to alleviate all of those concerns. Last March, we obtained $630,000 part of that transaction, we have engaged new management. We have seated a board of independent media-focused individuals with impeccable credentials and a deep understanding of the sports media landscape. We've put in place an RSA framework that, as Mr. Herman noted, will allow us to deleverage about 90% of our capital structure. And we will have separated soon from our soon-to-be former owner, Sinclair. In short, we've done everything that we have heard anecdotally from the Commissioner's office they were concerned about, and yet we've not been able to get anywhere from the Commissioner or his office in terms of advancing the ball on getting the 9 teams digital rights that we need and that we've asked for, nor has the Commissioner allowed us to even talk with those teams. In fact, quite to the contrary, the Commissioner's office has refused to allow those teams to negotiate with us. We've heard that directly. Even though some of those teams do want to talk to us. How do we know baseball wants to take the rights back? They've said so. The Commissioner said so publicly, both to the press and in publicly stated remarks at conferences. They're also building out their own infrastructure. They recently announced that they are opening up their own local media department, quote, to prepare for the takeover broadcast of the 17 teams. And in fact, they staffed that new department with several of our former senior high-ranking broadcast executives. They've also begun discussing with our distributors what they would be pricing the product at if and when they take over these teams. Notwithstanding the fact that we have existing contracts with these distributors, the bulk of which come up for renewal discussion in the next 12 months. In short, the Commissioner's office has made clear that they do want to take back the rights, and as our CEO often uses the phrase, go it alone, which will effectively drive us out of the market if they are successful. And we don't believe they will be, and we don't believe in any event we will be driven out of any market. But we're looking for the rights. We want to expand the digital rights so that we can get to the reach of the consumer on the digital side what the declination in linear cord cutting has created on the traditional linear side. We want to expand our reach. We can't expand our reach digitally to this group, this population of fans that don't have and don't want traditional linear. They don't want to watch it through their cable box. They want to be able to stream. We want to be able to accommodate that to reach the broadest audience we can. We don't want to be litigious here. There's been lots of opportunities. We don't want to be litigious. We would like to resolve this on a consensual basis. We have had innumerable conversations internally about how to do that. We've talked to our lenders about how to do that. We have outreached to the Commissioner's office between former management and current management dozens of times. We just want to find a way, if possible, to bring the digital rights for all 14 teams into the fold. We're not looking to take advantage of the teams. We understand that the teams need fair value. We're willing to pay fair value. But what we're trying to do is work through a model that is broken and no longer works given the change in consumer preference for sports viewing. This is not a Diamond-specific issue. All one needs to do is look at Discovery AT&T's recent announcement as to what it's doing with its own RSNs as further evidence that this is an industry problem. This is not a Diamond problem. We're just simply trying to implement changes to the economics of these agreements that will still result in the teams getting paid fair market value for their rights while not continuing to saddle Diamond with payment obligations that in the current world are well above fair market value and cost us tens of millions in annual losses. If we can achieve that, we think we all win. The teams get paid fair value, the fans get the reach they deserve, and we get the benefit of the growth of our business, which is what our lenders and stakeholders are expecting from us. We hope we can resolve things consensually, and we hope to continue those dialogues with the Commissioner's office in the hope that we can see a path through consensually with the Commissioner's office. If we can't, we will seek redress from the court. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Herman, is it now the time where I should see if there's anyone else who supports?
I think so, Your Honor, and maybe the easiest way to do it is to just go down the capital structure. It's logical. So first lien, second lien, unsecured, and then people can go from there.
Okay. Let me start with the
Thank
first liens. Is anyone who's unmuted wishes to make a statement on behalf of the first liens or a first lien lender?
Your Honor, can you hear me?
Just fine, Mr. Eggerman.
Thank you. Again, Daniel Eggerman from Kramer 11 on behalf of an ad hoc group of first lien lenders. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'll be brief. As I mentioned earlier, I'm joined by my Kramer 11 colleagues, Alexander Wolverton and Jennifer Charette. To the extent we need to address any issues in connection with any motions out of before the court this afternoon, you may be hearing from either or both of them. We are a relatively new addition to this situation, having been retained just a few weeks ago to represent the interests of a group of lenders holdings, a group of lenders who hold a weighted position towards the first lien loans. While we do have some holdings in other parts of the capital structure, the market value of those holdings is de minimis when compared to the value of the first lien holdings. So accordingly, we do not consider ourselves a cross-holder group like some of the other groups you may hear from today. We consider ourselves a first lien lender group. Since we've been retained, we, together with our bankers at Centerview, have been working closely with the debtors and their advisors on diligence and negotiating the terms for the consensual use of cash collateral. And I am pleased to confirm that we have reached an agreement on that front. The first lien group is keenly aware of the challenges facing not only the industry in general, but also these debtors specifically. And we recognize the need for the company to restructure its balance sheet and to recalibrate its operations and business plans to ensure its viability as a going concern. And the first lien lenders are willing to facilitate those efforts through the use of their collateral, including the cash collateral, on the terms set forth in the proposed order. As the court is also aware, the debtors have entered into an RSA with members of various cross-holder groups. The first lien group is not a party to that RSA, nor were we involved in its negotiations. The plan on which the RSA is premised purports to treat the first lien loans as unimpaired, but provides no detail as to what that means and how they intend to do that. If that means they intend to pay the first lien lenders in full and in cash on the effective date, I think we would applaud and welcome those efforts. But to the extent that the Chapter 11 plan envisioned by the RSA is not feasible or achievable, our group is ready and willing to be proactive and work constructively with the debtors and the other stakeholders to ensure the debtors emerge from Chapter 11 quickly, significantly deleveraged, and positioned for success. So unless Your Honor has any questions for me, I promised I'd be brief, and I'll cede the virtual podium over to the folks at Gibson Dunn if we are proceeding in order of lien priorities.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Eggerman. All righty. Let me turn it over to the second liens. Anyone wish to be heard? And let's see. I've got a couple of 5 stars. And you may.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Can you hear me?
Just fine.
Oh, thank you. Your Honor, James Grogan from Paul Hastings. We're here today on behalf of the ad hoc crossover group. With me are my partners Cheyenne Bhattacharya and Jamie Goldstein, as well as my colleague Matt Garofalo. Mr. Bhattacharya will handle the remarks that we have.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All righty. Counsel, is your line unmuted? Just a second. Let's see.
Your Honor, I think Mr. Greenberg is having trouble getting unmuted.
Let's see. Mr. Bhattacharya, can you hear me okay? Or can I hear you? And then I'm going to see if I can get Mr. Greenberg on. Let's see. Oh.
There we are. Can you hear me, Your Honor?
Just fine. Mr. Greenberg, hold on a second. I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to see if I can get Mr. Bhattacharya on the line.
Sure.
Thank you, and I apologize. I don't know how I muted you.
Your Honor, can you hear me?
Just fine. All right.
If we want to stay in order of priority, I'm happy to let Mr. Greenberg go first.
All righty. Mr. Greenberg?
Okay, Your Honor, you can hear me okay. I assume you can't see me because I noticed that my video went down about halfway through Mr. Herman's presentation. So,
I can hear you just fine.
I think I'm probably on. Okay, I apologize, although maybe it's better for everyone if you can't see me. So I assume this is just audio for now. So Your Honor, Scott Greenberg, Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher, we're counsel for a group of lenders who hold first lien term loan claims and second lien, both term loan and bond debt. Nice to be back in front of you. Obviously, it hasn't been too long. Our group, Your Honor, the ad hoc secured group is composed of creditors that hold over $125 million of the debtor's first lien term loans and about $3.1 billion of second lien loans and secured notes. And together, as RSA parties with the crossholder group, who you'll hear from after me, Paul Hastings and PJT, we collectively hold 34% of the first lien term loan claims, 69% of the second lien, and 57% of the unsecured funded debt claims. We filed a 2019 that lays this all out. This morning, that's at docket number 118. Your Honor, just if you'll bear with me, I just want to put a little background and context. Obviously, Mr. Herman did a great job going through at length how we got to where we are today. And candidly, we've been along for the ride for quite some time in these discussions that long predate these Chapter 11 cases. As Your Honor has now heard a couple times from debtors' counsel, the debtors filed these cases to effectuate a pre-negotiated balance sheet restructuring that's going to reduce their total funded debt obligations by over $8 billion, which is obviously no small number. But it's a number in which I think collectively we in the company thought needed to happen to position the company to continue investing and expanding its DTC offerings for long-term growth following this Chapter 11. Your Honor, we've talked about the RSA, so I don't want to cover ground Mr. Herman already did. I think it's needless to say, as you hear, I'm sure in all your cases, this one in particular, this RSA and the restructuring term sheet, or RTS as we refer to it, that's attached to the RSA was a function of months of around-the-clock at times, but good faith negotiation, I would say, among the ad hoc groups and the debtors, which resulted in the RSA before you, which has 69% of the second lien claims locked up, as well as 57% of the unsecured funded debt claims. And that's important, obviously, because it's those two constituencies that are set to receive the vast majority of the reorganized equity under the debtor's proposed path forward. Just a little bit of background, because Mr. Herman touched on it, and I just want to make clear kind of who was at the table at various points in time. But we have been working with the debtors, myself in particular, for over 2 years at this point, and well before the filing of these cases. The ad hoc secure group first organized with its advisors in late 2020, and we've been working with the debtors since early 21, when the company began exploring options for a capital infusion to, among other things, as you heard from Mr. Herman, really enable the company to continue developing its DTC business as consumers moved away from the linear product and have the term we've been using, cut the cord. And in the face of that declining linear business, the ad hoc secured group, our group, has been there to support the company every step of the way. They've restricted numerous times on the principal level for elongated periods of time, as Mr. Herman pointed out. And ultimately, that led to our group fully backstopping and providing a new money financing transaction, which provided the company with $635 million of new liquidity to support the business. And that was March of 2022. So we're almost about exactly on a year of when the group put that money in. And that was after approximately 18 months of working with the company and Mr. Goldman and others to come up with a structure that we all collectively thought would maximize the value of the company for all stakeholders. As Your Honor will hear, and as you just heard from the Kramer Levin Group, obviously, as in any market, paper trades hands. And some of the folks that were part of, the First Lien Group that put in that new money in about a year ago have since exited the paper, which has now led to what you're seeing as the composition of three groups. As part of that transaction, which Mr. Herman talked about, our group was intimately involved in the governance changes that were discussed, and were personally involved on the principal level in the extensive board search that went on with the company and our lenders to identify a specific set of board members with a real focus on industry experience, right? Because we're building a new product and expanding a new product with DTC rather than what you typically see in our world, which is loading up a board with a bunch of restructuring-oriented folks. That was not the focus. So I think what you're seeing today is really what you've seen from our group for the better part of 2 years, which is being here to support the company through challenging circumstances as we've been in the past. And just like the significant liquidity that we put into the business about a year ago, we also engaged with Mr. Herman and Moelis and the advisors when they reached out to us this summer to discuss the need to really address what is obviously an over-levered capital structure. This group has stepped up again, Your Honor, leading, as I mentioned previously, an equitization of over $8 billion of debt to help the company delever and right-size the balance sheet. And to state the obvious, our client's investment of a year ago has not gone exactly as planned, right? We were putting in money for them to help build out their DTC business, and I don't think any of us thought we would be here so soon. But nonetheless, our clients, once again, are partnering themselves with the company. And honestly, Your Honor, put aside the professionals, our actual principals, at least in my experience, have spent more time principal to principal with Mr. Herman's clients, working hand in hand to try to get this company on the right footing, including in connection with the transactions that you see outlined in the RSA. I'm not going to go down the RSA path again because I think Mr. Herman covered it well. I think the one thing I would point out, which is probably painfully obvious, but it was a hard reality for our clients, having just put in $635 million of fresh capital last March when the company reached out to us, over the summer to talk about fixing the balance sheet. But ultimately, the ad hoc groups, and not just our group, but the crossover group, and I know you'll hear from them next, engaged with the company and its advisors. We did everything we could to help get the company and its house and its capital structure in order, right? So the company would be in the best footing, in the best position to approach its operational partners, the teams in the leagues. And the concept, at least among the funded debt creditors, I'll let the Paul Hastings Group speak for itself, but I think the driving concept was to get a deal among our capital structure to position the company to approach the leagues and teams and discuss the optimal path forward. And that deal, obviously, you see, it's reflected in the RSA. And just to cut through it, as you heard from Mr. Herman, effectively that is a deleveraging of everything behind the new money that we put in last March, which is approximately $6.5 billion of second lien claims being equitized, along with $1.8 billion of unsecured funded debt claims being equitized in exchange for minority rights, minority equity and warrants. And we feel that has put the company in the best positioning to now go have these necessary conversations, which you've heard some preview of, with the leagues and the teams to get this company on the best footing for an exit from bankruptcy. I think it would go without saying we got to where we are today after a lot of work. It was no easy feat. It's gotten more complicated as new players have entered the capital structure. Today's not the day for a discussion of valuation. I don't think we agree that the company needs more deleveraging than the $8 billion set forth in the RSA, but we could save that for another day if and when it becomes necessary. But I will say we're not blind to the fact that there's work to be done and more would be with the leagues and the teams. And I think I speak for our group, and I'll let the crossover speak for themselves, but I think we will stand behind the company in pushing that forward to get to the right place, just like we've stood behind this company as partners for the last 2.5 years as we enter these Chapter 11 cases. So with that, Your Honor, again, apologies for the tech difficulties, but I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. Let me hear from the crossover.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you hear me?
Just fine, thank you.
Great. Again, for the record, Cheyenne Bhattacharya, Paul Hastings, appearing on behalf of the ad hoc crossover group. As Mr. Herman noted in the opening presentation, the ad hoc crossover group holds significant positions throughout the debtor's capital structure, including first lien debt, second lien debt, and a majority of the debtor's unsecured notes. I think a lot of the ground has already been amply covered by Mr. Herman and Mr. Greenberg. So I'll just note that, I think in our view, the restructuring support agreement that the debtors filed at the commencement of these cases is pretty remarkable in terms of the broad consensus that it represents across the debtor's capital structure for a pretty massive leveraging transaction. And, it's really the end result of a hard-fought negotiation amongst the crossover group, the ad hoc secured group represented by Mr. Greenberg and the debtors. As both Mr. Herman and Mr. Greenberg have noted, there's still a good amount of work to be done to successfully reorganize the debtors' businesses. But I would like to echo Mr. Greenberg's comments and, just express our support for the debtors' reorganization efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the capital structure wish to be heard? Mr. Seligman? Let me see if I can find you there.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Just fine.
Okay. Thank you very much, Your Honor. Again, David Seligman on behalf of Sinclair Broadcast Group. First, Your Honor, I did want to say it's a pleasure to appear before Your Honor for the first time on your side of the bench. So I appreciate that. I'm going to try and be brief. I do know that that Houston's playing tonight at 8:20, so hopefully we can get out well before then. Your Honor, I just want to give a little background and perspective from Sinclair's perspective at the bottom side of the capital structure. And although we don't have a signed RSA with the debtors and the creditors right now, we are very supportive and we're very close is the bottom line. Your Honor, I would say we have three different main roles in connection with Diamond. First, obviously, we're the ultimate parent company of Diamond and the sole shareholder. Secondly, we are party to a management services agreement with the debtors, whereby we provide comprehensive managerial, operational, and administrative services to the debtor. Suffice it to say, Your Honor, that Diamond could not exist without the services that we provide. And we're happy to provide those services, and we've been providing those services. I can attest that there's lots of Sinclair employees who are pretty tired right now because they've been working around the clock to support the debtors and provide them with information in connection with their first day motions and things of that sort. So we've had a good collaborative relationship, and we want to continue that. The services are not just sort of nuts and bolts, but historically have also been helping to negotiate new deals with these teams and trying to use and leverage some of Sinclair's own separate contractual leverage in order to help even get better deals on behalf of Diamond. Some of our, and we obviously get a fee every month in connection with the management services agreement. One of the ways we have we heard discussion about the capital raise in March is at that time we did agree to defer a significant portion of our management fees in order to assist the company in its, to help shore up its liquidity. Those amounts, we agreed to defer those amounts until the Chapter 11 filing, and so those have been deferred. And as you'll hear in a second, to the extent we can get a deal, those will be continued to be deferred, or at least a portion of them. As of the petition date, we have approximately $90 million in deferred fees. So that just goes to show you the scope of what we've been deferring in order to assist the debtor's efforts. Your Honor, the third hat, I guess we'll say in connection with the debtor's case, is we are the provider of liquidity to Diamond. They do have a significant amount of cash right now, no doubt, but we are the lender under a receivables facility. It's a kind of a classic purchase of receivables by a debtor SPV, and then we loan against the SPV. Under that, there's approximately $216 million of availability, and current outstanding balance is about $193 million. And we're providing upwards of $80 to $100 million of liquidity every month to the debtors in terms, loaning against receivables that have been purchased by this SPV. So that is a significant part of what we've done. That is built to bankruptcy filing. That's obviously default right now, and that's part of the discussions that we've been having with the debtors in connection with the broader restructuring support agreement. Your Honor, speaking of sort of deal dynamics, we too have been engaged in discussions with the debtors and with the creditors since the early fall, as things really stepped up and negotiations really stepped up in terms of all the parties trying to see how they could assist in this broader restructuring efforts. And we've also spent time weekend night trying to see what we can get done. Your Honor, it was reported that in December we did have an agreement in principle. We do have an agreement in principle with the debtors and with the creditor groups for that deleveraging. Big picture, Your Honor, the debtors were walking away from their equity. We would continue to provide management services during the course of the case, and then it would flip to a transition services agreement at an even reduced rate that would go on for upwards of 18 months. And the AR facility would be refinanced out, and there would be mutual releases between the parties, including our release of all those deferred payments that we had under the management services agreement. Your Honor, since December, all the parties have been working in good faith to try and turn this into an RSA. Debtors were able to get there with the creditors for their RSA. I think we were on the goal line, Your Honor, in terms of getting this done. It just we kind of ran out of time. Just things being what they are, we ran out of time in terms of being able to get it done. But we are very hopeful that we will be able to get to the finish line on an RSA and get folded in within, I'm hoping, the next few days or so. And we're committed to working with all the parties to be able to do it. That's important, not just for all the parties, but specifically for the debtors, because one of the pieces of getting that RSA in place is that we will then be in a position to continue to fund the AR facility on a current basis, and we will be able to provide the management services agreements on that temporarily deferred basis during the course of the case. So we look forward to doing that. We look forward to wrapping this up, and we're very supportive of the company, and we're collaborative with them and with the creditors in order to do so. So unless Your Honor has any questions, that's what I wanted to apprise Your Honor.
No questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Seligman. Okay. Let's see. Does anyone else wish to be heard? In the form of an opening before we get to first days. May need to hit 5-star if there's anyone. All right. Let's see. Alrighty. Mr. Don't see anyone else. Does anyone else wish to be heard? And if you haven't hit 5-star, please hit 5-star. If not, I'm going to, I've got one. I've not got one. I've got a 212 number.
Yes, Your Honor, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Just fine.
Terrific. Nice to see you, Judge. Your Honor, for the record, Vincent Indelicato, Proskauer Rose, LLP, on behalf of the National Basketball Association and its member teams that are party to a local telecast agreement with a regional sports network owned or controlled by Diamond Sports Group, LLC. With me today in the virtual courtroom, my partner, Michael Nervis, and my colleague, Steve Ma. Your Honor, for the last several weeks, the NBA worked diligently with the debtors to try to achieve a negotiated framework that not only ensured NBA fans would have continued access to games in local Bally sports markets, but also preserved the value of our digital and linear rights, while giving the debtors and their creditors the flexibility to best position these cases for a successful reorganization and a prompt emergence from Chapter 11. Now, Your Honor, what makes these cases so fundamentally different from the many others that routinely come before the bankruptcy court is that these digital and linear rights, in essence, the very lifeblood of the debtor's business, are enormously valuable intellectual property derived from the services of our players and the substantial investments of our league and our teams. And so recognizing that criticality, consistent with their statements on the record today, the debtors have assured us, and the cash collateral budget would appear to evidence, that the NBA and its Diamond teams will continue to get paid in the ordinary course for the use of those rights through the remainder of this season. Given the value of our rights and their importance to Diamond, we believe we are entitled to receive the same treatment for next season, but have yet to reach an agreement with the debtors. And while we understand the debtors and their creditors would like time to assess the benefits and the burdens of their executory contracts as they evaluate the feasibility of their business plan and undertake their negotiations later this fall and into next year with the major cable, satellite, and virtual media distributors, it is absolutely critical, Judge, that we have certainty as to the continuity of our game telecasts and the timely payment of our rights fees for our enormously valuable intellectual property, and not subsidize optionality for the debtors and their creditors at the expense of our teams, our players, and our fans. Your Honor, arranging production and distribution of live sports events at this level requires significant time, so we need Diamond to provide assurances for next season as soon as possible. As such, pending further discussions with the debtors, we reserve our rights to come back to Your Honor in short order and request any appropriate and necessary relief. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Just looking around, Mr. Herman, it may be time to shift to first days.
All right, it's about that time. Your Honor, with your indulgence, I'm going to cede the podium to my partner, Mr. Parlin, to go through the cash collateral motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Your Honor, can you hear me?
Just fine. Thank you. And before you start, I just want to ask everyone to, just a friendly reminder to take a look at your phone and place it on mute unless you're speaking. I just want to make sure that we can all hear each other. Mr. Parlin, you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. For the record, Andrew Parlin, Paul Weiss for the debtors. Your Honor, before I get into the agenda, I just wanted to do a little roadmap, make sure we're on the same page here. There are 12 items on the agenda today. Orders have measured for 3 of them: the joint administration motion, the complex case designation motion, and the Kroll claims agent motion. So we won't be handling those, obviously. And I did want to inform the court that we know of no objections today to any of these orders. None have been filed, and we've not been informed that any are going to be made live. Obviously, folks will have the chance to do that if they so choose. I did want to particularly note and thank the U.S. Trustee's Office who provided us comments. I believe we're fully resolved on everything as we move forward here. What Your Honor is going to see on this agenda is a very typical slate of first day motion. There's nothing out of the ordinary, as Mr. Herman noted. You don't see a good financing motion. You're we'll start with the cash collateral motion in a moment, but the debtors are in a position to fund their businesses and cases with the cash on hand and cash to be generated as they go forward operating. Mr. Graham, I'll be handling the cash collateral motion. Mr. Graham will then take over for cash management. And after that, Your Honor, the attorneys who do the real work on these motions will present them to you as we go. I do want to note, though, that some of the very talented and dedicated attorneys who worked on these won't be presenting today, both from the Paul Weiss and Wilmer firms, but we will hopefully afford them an opportunity to be before you as this case goes on. So with that, Your Honor, I'd like to move two declarations into evidence. First, the declaration of Mr. DeVoe in support of the first day motions, and that's at docket number 126-1. And the second would be the declaration of Mr. Jamal in support of cash collateral, and that's at docket 126-10.
Anyone object to the admission of 126-1 and 126-10 for purposes of today's hearing? Okay, they're admitted.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. So on to agenda item number 3, which is the debtor's motion to use cash collateral to provide associated adequate protection. Your Honor, this morning we filed a revised proposed form of order at docket number 134 with a red line to the originally filed version at docket number 135 with very minor and ministerial changes, but I wanted to confirm that we're working off the same document.
Yes, thank you, and I did have a chance to review it.
Perfect. So what Your Honor has before you is a 68-page order that would permit the debtors to use cash collateral on an interim basis through the second day hearing in April. We've been in touch with Chambers about that date, and maybe we can come back to that at the end of the presentation here. Your Honor, the order is a consensual order, and the debtors also submit that it is a favorable order and a fair order. And what do I mean by that? The order is consensual. Something like 90% of the company's first lien lenders have consented to the use of cash collateral on the terms laid out in it. The lenders, as Mr. Herman noted, span 3 creditor groups. They even include lenders who are outside the creditor groups. These consenting lenders, as you've heard from their attorneys, have different interests. They have different points of view. Some are primarily first lien lenders. Some are heavily second lien holders and look at it through that lens. Others are very heavy in the unsecured debt and have that angle. But the bottom line is they've consented across the capital structure, across the first lien. About 90% have consented. And in a capital structure as large, as complex, as diverse, and with as much history as this one, we view that as a major achievement, and we're very grateful that the lenders have consented in this way. The order is a favorable order, Your Honor, and by that I mean it's an order that's very favorable to the debtor's estate. It allows the debtors to use their ample liquidity to continue operating in the ordinary course while funding their reorganization. Some items to note in that vein. The foundation of the order is the approved budget. It's attached as Exhibit 1 to the interim order. It's a 13-week budget. It's a straightforward 13-week budget. It sets forth the debtor's anticipated receipts and disbursements as they operate in the ordinary course, broadcasting gains, as Mr. Herman noted, paying employees, and just doing what the debtors do in operating. And in looking at the budget, if Your Honor takes a look at it or has looked at it, you can see that there definitely is no need for a new money debt financing. This is not a case control cash collateral order. There are a few milestones. You can have them memorized. They're the interim order milestone, the final order milestone, and an outside plan effective date milestone of December 31st. That's it. Similarly, termination rights are plain vanilla. The determination rights Your Honor is going to see in every cash collateral order that should be in the cash collateral order, violating a material provision of it, having the case converted, granting an unauthorized lien. There are, of course, termination rights around budget variances, but the debtors feel that they have plenty of space to deal with any variance to what the budget lays out. As Mr. Eggerman noted, the RSA does provide for unimpairment of the 1L. The 1L group negotiated for termination rights around the RSA and the plan to the extent that the plan does anything but propose, or the RSA is amended to do anything but propose, that the 1Ls are unimpaired. That too would be a termination right, but that just means that if that were to happen, we'd be having a discussion with our creditors. So the order is consensual, favorable to the debtors, and it's a fair order, Your Honor. It's fair to the creditors. It's fair to the secured parties. It adequately protects them, and it paves the way for them to be active participants and contributors to the debtors' restructuring. I want to run through the adequate protection package very quickly. As typical, both the first and second lien lenders are provided super priority administrative expense claims and adequate protection liens subject to the carve-out, with the first lien having priority over the second lien. There are reporting obligations where the secured parties will receive very detailed visibility on a regular basis from the debtors. And the adequate protection package also, unsurprisingly, includes payment of professional fees. And the professional fees payable here are the professionals for each of the ad hoc groups. It's tempting to kind of glide by that, but I wanted to pause on it for a moment. And I'll probably get some side-eye from Mr. DeVell over here as I talk about why I believe debtors believe this is an important feature of the cash collateral order. As we've talked about throughout this presentation today, the three creditor groups consist of dozens of holders, incredibly sophisticated investors, first lien loans, second lien loans, unsecured bonds. And again, we've seen that these creditors have different views and sometimes see some things differently in different ways. And I think we'll see that again as we move forward, and that's perfectly fine. It was very important for the debtors to start this case in an inclusive place. And that's what we've done. We have 90% or so of the first lien lenders consenting to cash collateral. We have an RSA with 35% of the first lien, about 70% of the second lien, and nearly 60% of the unsecured debt. As Mr. Greenberg pointed out, this is a community of stakeholders that has been working together intensely for a long time in one form or another, advisor to advisor, principal to principal, principals and advisors, pretty much continually, at least for the last 6 or 7 months and even for a year before that. There's no reason to disturb this ecosystem. There's no reason to disturb the way the capital structure stakeholders are functioning. There's every reason, in fact, to continue it as we start this new chapter, as we deal with budget periods, as we deal with business plans, what comes next week or next month. So this aspect of the adequate protection package is entirely appropriate in the debtor's view, just as is the entire adequate protection set up in this order. So, Your Honor, again, we have a consensual order, favorable order to the debtors, fair one of the secure parties. Happy to go into more detail with any particulars that Your Honor wants to ask about or would like me to present on, but also happy to rest on the reasons set forth in the motion on the basis of the Jamal Declaration and subject to any questions or issues that others have for me.
Let me just ask if anyone wishes to be heard in connection with the cash collateral motion. Okay, I'll note that there was a motion filed at docket number 25 seeking the use of cash collateral. It's a consensual use of cash collateral. I'm going to find that emergency consideration is appropriate and notice is appropriate under the circumstances as well as service. The court relies on the declaration that has been submitted into evidence for purposes of today. I'm going to grant the use of cash collateral as requested in the motion, and more particularly, as I'm going to re-sign the order at docket number 134, the revised form of order. I find that the use of cash collateral is necessary, and the terms on which that request is made and on a consensual basis is more than fair under the circumstances. And again, it is consensual, and the debtor needs the use of cash collateral. It will help stabilize the business and keep the debtor, allow the debtor to ease into the Chapter 11 process. I appreciate, and it hasn't forgotten how much hard work has gone into getting one of these across the finish line. So I've reviewed the original order and the revised form of order, and I've got no issues with it. And I do, as always, and I'll say this one time, and I do appreciate the United States Trustee's office here and the work that they put in, because I know that they've reviewed every one of these. So I thank you for your efforts. I've signed the order. I've got to plug in a final hearing date. When do you want to come back?
Thank you, Your Honor, first of all. Second of all, we had communicated with your chambers for April 13th at 2 p.m., subject to your being okay with that.
If you got it from Ms. Saldana, it's better than getting it from me, because I know it'll work. So April 13th at 2 p.m. will be the final hearing. Final objections. Why don't we do April 6th at 5 p.m.? Does that work? A week before?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
So April 13th at 2 p.m., April 6th at 5 p.m. will be the objection deadline, and we'll use that for all other interims. And so I'm writing it down so I don't forget what I just said. So give me a second. Okay. I have signed the order. And I would note that I've reviewed the budget as well, and the budget is reasonable under the circumstances. And I'm approving the budget as well. So, okay, I have signed that order, and it is off to docketing.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I'll yield to my colleague, Mr. Ben.
Graham.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Joe Graham and Paul Weiss on behalf of the debtors. As Mr. Perlin just mentioned, the next motion up on the agenda is the cash management motion, which is up for on an interim basis today. It was filed at docket number 14. I hope to keep this brief. We filed a revised form of order at docket number 129, which resolved the remaining U.S. trustee comments to the order. With respect to the proposed order generally, we spent a lot of time prior to filing it with our various stakeholders who you've heard from today, working on that form of order to incorporate their comments. And we also incorporated some of the U.S. trustees' comments in advance and continue to work with them afterwards. Obviously, it was a very important motion in order for us because access to our cash system is very important so we can make the payments for the relief we're requesting today and our go-forward payments that are in our budget that you just approved as part of the cash collateral order, as well as intercompany transactions, which are addressed by the cash management motion. As I've noted, we've resolved our last the kind of concern raised by the Office of the United States Trustee. Specifically, that was with respect to one of our bank accounts at J.P. Morgan. It's an investment account, and we've been seeking a Section 345 waiver. We were not intending to use it during the case, and we thought that it may actually comply with 345 because it actually invests in U.S. Treasuries. But nonetheless, we were not intending to use it. And to resolve the U.S. trustees' concerns about a waiver, especially in light of the current banking situation, we agreed to remove that waiver request from the order. And so now the order is, I don't believe there's any standing objections to the form of order, Your Honor. Okay. There's no need for a waiver with respect to the other 19 bank accounts, and they're all authorized depository banks with the United States trustee. Okay. So, Your Honor, I don't know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to address.
Yeah. Mr. Wen, let me hear from the United States trustee. You had a chance to review the proposed order at 129?
Yes, Your Honor, and I've worked with the debtors in coming up with language. The reason why it's an interim and not a final is we have about $426 million. Just having the money in the authorized depository itself doesn't mean the bank will collateralize it. There's certain steps that need to be taken behind the scenes for the bank to confirm with the uniform deposit depository agreement with us. So we just need a little bit more time, and we're going to be working with the debtors and the bank to make sure that the $426 million that is in this estate can be properly collateralized.
Okay. Anyone wish to be heard in connection with the cash management motion? Okay, I view cash management's motions as they're substantive, but also very, really procedural as well. They help maintain the status quo and allow the debtor to ease into the Chapter 11 process. I reviewed the proposed order. I appreciate the parties working with the trustee. It looks good to me. I've reviewed the interim order and the red line that was filed, and I've signed that order, and I've plugged in the same dates for the final unbill.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I have signed that order, and give me a second so I can really tell you that it's off the docketing and really mean it. I think I was checking. The order refers to exhibits to the motion, which is great, so I don't have to worry about knock it on exhibits. Yep, so that is off to docketing.
Thank you, Your Honor. With that, I'm going to hand the podium over to my colleague, Mr. Brian Herman, who is there.
Thank you.
Your Honor, just briefly, Mr. Bromley, on behalf of Major League Baseball, emailed me that he's been trying to speak and has not been able to get in, so I think we should give him that opportunity.
Yep, absolutely. Mr. Bromley, if you can, I got it there. Oh. I think I got you, Mr. Bromley. I appreciate it. I apologize. I have gone on here. Let's see.
Can you hear me, Your Honor?
Mr. Bromley, first of all, let me apologize to you. I thought I had unmuted that line, and it sounds like I had not, and that's entirely on me. So, Mr. Herman, I appreciate you letting me know, and Mr. Bromley, I appreciate you, and I appreciate you hanging in there, and apologize that you had to hold up a sign. That's on me.
No problem, Your Honor. Thank you, and I apologize for jumping in at this point. I did want to speak around the same time that Mr. Delicato did on behalf of the NBA. But speaking on behalf of the Office of the Commissioner, which is otherwise known as Major League Baseball, as well as the 14 teams, I did want to respond to some of the comments that were made by Mr. Goldman in particular. We are, as Mr. Goldman noted, dealing with a broken model. It is not the responsibility of Major League Baseball to fix that model. We have been in conversations over the past 2 years, on and off, with representatives, the debtors, both with respect to current management and former management. But it's important to note that when Mr. Goldman was talking about rights, a right that the debtors do not have is to force Major League Baseball or its constituent teams to enter into new agreements to provide for digital rights that the debtors do not currently possess. It is true that the Major League Baseball and its constituent clubs have been looking at and working towards having a replacement in the event that these debtors are not able to continue in business. It's an appropriate and prudent thing for Major League Baseball and its teams to be doing. This is a debtor that is writing off in excess of $8 billion. And we're talking here today about very optimistic things. We wish them well, but it is not the responsibility of Major League Baseball or its teams to make it work. We're here, we're ready to talk. We wish them well, but we are also, as Mr. Delicato mentioned, with respect to the NBA teams, very concerned. And we are concerned because Major League Baseball is about to start. Opening day is just 2 weeks away. And each of the teams, each of the 14 teams that are tied right now, from a linear perspective with the debtors, have 162 games to play before the postseason. And on average, 150 of those games are scheduled to be televised by these debtors.
We will be watching very carefully to make sure that all amounts are paid and all performance is delivered. And we want to let you know, Your Honor, that with respect to the comments that were made about payments that are built into the budget, two leagues were mentioned, the NBA and the NHL. There was no mention made of Major League Baseball. It is essential that the Major League Baseball clubs be paid on time in full the amounts that they are due under the agreements that the debtors have entered into. Any failure to do that will require us to come to Your Honor for relief immediately. Mr. Goldman made some comments about litigiousness. I don't know what kind of litigation he might have in mind, but these debtors, though they're entitled to the protection of Chapter 11, cannot force Major League Baseball or its teams to do anything that they're not obligated to do. So I just wanted to make those statements, Your Honor, and to let you know that we too, like the NBA, will be watching carefully, and to the extent that there's any failure in performance, economic or operational, we would be back before Your Honor looking for prompt relief, perhaps on an emergency basis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to cede the podium now to my colleague, Ms. Alice Nossinger.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
Alice Nossinger, Paul Weiss, on behalf of the debtors. Your Honor, I'll be handling the next two items on today's agenda. First, we have the debtors' customers programs motion. That's item number 5 on the agenda and filed at docket number 11. Your Honor, by this motion, the debtors seek to maintain their existing customer programs, including honoring pre-petition customer program obligations in the ordinary course of business. As described in the motion, the debtors' customers include distributors, or the MVPDs, advertisers, DTC subscribers, and also programming suppliers. Historically, the debtors' relationships with their distributors has been the largest source of the debtors' revenue. The debtors have relationships with over 450 distributors, but the majority of the revenue comes from a handful of national distributors, including, for example, DirecTV and Comcast. These relationships are governed by contracts, which provide for certain customer programs, including production guarantee obligations and advertising carve-outs, each of which is described in the motion. As of the petition date, the debtors estimate that they have approximately $40.1 million in outstanding product guarantee obligations owed to distributors. I will also note for Your Honor that one of the debtors' distributors did reach out to us prior to today's hearing to discuss treatment of their claims. They are very supportive of the relief being requested in this motion, and the parties have agreed to continue discussions in the coming weeks. I raise this today only as a preview for Your Honor, as we may be back seeking further relief with respect to that distributor. The debtor's second largest source of revenue has historically come from its advertiser customers, including direct advertisers as well as advertising agencies. As described in the motion, customer programs provided to advertisers include commission obligations, prepaid ad sale obligations, make-good obligations, and promotional obligations. As of the petition date, the debtors estimate that they have approximately $5.2 million in accrued advertising obligations. The third category of customers are the debtors' DTC customers, including Valley Sports subscribers and streaming platforms. The debtors, for example, offer free trials of Valley Sports Plus to sports fans and also may issue refunds to subscribers. The debtors estimate that they have approximately $1.2 million in outstanding DTC obligations as of the petition date. Finally, the debtors also offer certain customer programs in connection with their programming agreements. For example, the debtors incur barter obligations to their programming suppliers when the debtors agree to air programming in exchange for providing advertising inventory. As of the petition date, the debtors do not believe they have any material outstanding programming obligations. Your Honor, the debtors' customers are critically important to the business. And as the debtors enter Chapter 11, maintaining customer relationships without disruption, including through honoring customer program obligations, is essential to preserving the value of the debtors' estates. The commencement of these Chapter 11 cases is likely to create apprehension on the part of current and potential customers about continuing or beginning relationships with the debtor. As you've heard today, the debtors industry is highly competitive, And if the debtors are unable to continue honoring their obligations to customers, existing and potential customers may opt to take their business elsewhere. The debtors therefore seek to ensure their customers through this motion of the debtor's commitment to the relationships with their customers. We believe that the relief being sought here is necessary to protect and preserve the value of the debtor's estate. Your Honor, unless you have any questions, we would request that the court enter the order.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to be heard in connection with the customer programs motion? Okay. I have reviewed the motion based on the declarations, the excellent presentation of counsel. I'm comfortable. I have no questions. I have reviewed the proposed form of order, and I've signed it. It's off to docketing. I've approved it. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Next, Your Honor, I will turn to the debtor's vendors motion. That's item 6 on the agenda, and it's filed at docket number 10. By this motion, the debtors are seeking authority to pay certain pre-petition vendor claims. The debtors have tailored the relief under this motion to ensure that they have access to the specialized equipment and services necessary for debtors to produce, distribute, and market their sports programming and products. As the debtors enter Chapter 11 with the intention of continuing to produce and broadcast programming without disruption, maintaining their vendor relationships is top of mind. Any disruption in the debtors' vendor relationships could negatively impact the debtors' ability to operate at this critical juncture as the debtors transition into Chapter 11. The debtors were very measured in their analysis and were seeking authority to pay up to only $650,000 in pre-petition vendor claims during the interim period, and only up to $2.45 million on a final basis. We believe that the relief being sought in this motion is necessary to protect and preserve the value of the debtor's estate. Your Honor, unless you have any questions, we request that the court enter the interim order.
Okay, let's see. Let me just hear from the United States trustee and make sure that you've had an opportunity to review this motion.
I went to the U.S. trustee. I've taken a look at the motion, the order, and we made some comments here, and those comments were accepted. We have no opposition to the motion.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to be heard in connection with the, what I'll call the vendor motion? Okay. I have reviewed the critical vendor motion. I'm going to find that the relief requested is appropriate based on the declarations that have been submitted, the court's review of the motion. I'm going to find that emergency relief is appropriate, and I appreciate that the trustee has had the opportunity to review this. I've reviewed the order, and it looks good to me, so I'm going to plug in some dates here, making sure that I got this right. April 13th at 2 p.m., and then April 6th at 5 p.m. for the final. And I've signed that, and it is off to docketing as well. Thank you, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. That concludes my presentation for today, and I will now turn the podium over to my colleague, Ms. Lascano.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
For the record, Stephanie Lascano of Paul Weiss on behalf of the debtors. I'll be presenting items 7 and 8 on today's agenda, the debtors' wages motion and taxes motion. Item number 7 on the agenda is the debtors' wages motion at docket number 12. Your Honor, as described in the motion, the debtors' workforce includes approximately 600 employees, 1,500 temporary workers, 250 independent contractors, and thousands of additional non-employee staff. This workforce performs all manner of functions for the debtors, including in finance, operations, marketing, engineering, and talent. These skilled and dedicated individuals are the backbone of the debtor's business and one of their greatest assets. Additionally, many of these folks rely on their compensation to pay rent, buy groceries, and satisfy other daily living expenses. Accordingly, the debtors seek authority to pay approximately $11.5 million in pre-petition compensation and benefit obligations owed to their workforce, and also some amounts to third parties on account of incidental costs and obligations. Additionally, the debtors seek a limited waiver of the automatic stay to allow claims against the debtor's workers' compensation program to proceed. As noted in the motion, certain key personnel benefits programs and administrative functions are provided to the debtors and their employees under the Management Services Agreement with Sinclair. While certain of these programs and functions are described in the motion, provide a full picture of the debtor's compensation and benefits programs, the motion does not seek relief with respect to any pre-petition amount owed to Sinclair on account of the MSA. Additionally, the debtors are not seeking to exceed the priority cap or pay insiders under any severance, incentive, or retention plans through this motion. Unless Your Honor has any questions about this motion, we would request that it be granted.
Anyone wish to be heard in connection with the employee wage motion? Okay. Ms. Lascano, you did a fantastic job. I really appreciate it. Thank you for walking me through everything. I have no questions. I would just ask management to just communicate how important the court finds this motion. And everybody focuses on the other ones, but this is the one that leaves me with the greatest impression every time. I take it the most serious. This is the one that allows employees to continue to receive their wages and to have comfort that if they work and that their insurance is going to continue. So this is an incredibly important motion. I find it to be the most important one, and I understand cash collateral is obviously incredibly important, but from a my viewpoint, this is the one that's really important to me. So I appreciate, Ms. Lascano, you taking it with the care that you did and walking it through. This is the one that people really care about, who are on the ground every day, making sure. And I want folks to communicate that the judge found it equally important. I don't know where this case goes or what happens, but people need to know that on April 1st, when their bills are due, that they're going to have that there'll be a check there waiting for them. So I very much appreciate it, and I'm going to sign that order.
Thank you, Your Honor. The next item on the agenda is item number 8, the debtor's taxes motion at docket number 9. By this motion, the debtors seek authority to pay pre-petition taxes and fees totaling approximately $1.04 million, as well as authorization to pay taxes and fees in the ordinary course during these Chapter 11 cases. The debtors' taxes and fees are primarily on account of income and gross receipts taxes of the debtors, and payment of these taxes and fees is necessary to ensure the continued and uninterrupted operation of the debtor's business. If Your Honor doesn't have any questions regarding the taxes motion, we would request that it be granted.
No, I'll just take the lead on this one. Pay your taxes. I'm going to grant the motion.
Thank you, Your Honor, and agreed.
All right. And I appreciate, it's a really good taxes motion presentation, by the way. It got right to the point, and so I very much appreciate it. And I say this generally, and not just to you, but for anyone else who's appearing. I very much appreciate allowing other lawyers to participate in the first day motions. I think it's vitally important to the practice. And I remember a time where, younger lawyers had to wait to just even show up in the courtroom. Used to, a good day was when you got an extra dial-in that you could listen into the first day hearing. And first time I ever got into court, I rode with the paralegals, so I acted, I was the person who handed out the red lines, and that was the way I was able to find my way into the courthouse. You did what you could to get in the room because you wanted to see what it was like and not just hear about it. So you're appearing and participating, and you took it really seriously, and so I thank you very much for doing that. Thank you very much. I've signed the order.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And I know I'm not the only one here who, at the same time, who found odd ways to get themselves into courtrooms at the time, because at some point you got in, and sometimes you had to sit in the back, and then you got the back bench, and then one day you got to sit at the table, and that was big stuff. So it was different times, and I'm glad the times have changed a bit. and we're allowing other lawyers to participate in hearings. So it's great to see you, Mr. Scott.
Yes, appreciate the opportunity to be at the podium in front of you today, Your Honor.
Thank you.
That ends my presentation to the court, and our next presenter will be my colleague, Shu Pang, who will cover the remaining items on the agenda.
All right.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Supine Paul Weiss on behalf of the debtors. I will be presenting item 9 through item 11 in this afternoon's agenda. So the next item on our agenda is the debtors' utilities motion, filed as docket number 8, agenda number 9. First, we would like to thank the United States trustee for providing comments to this motion. We have filed a revised proposed order at docket number 130, which redline marked against the previously filed version at docket number 131-2 to address the last remaining comments made by the United States trustee. So the United States trustee has confirmed sign-off of this revised order. Moving back to the motion itself, through this motion, the debtors seek to approve their proposed adequate assurance of payment for future utility services, prohibit the utility companies from altering, reducing, or discontinuing services, and approve the debtors' proposed procedures for resolving additional adequate assurance requests. To provide their utility companies adequate assurance of payment, the debtors propose to deposit an amount equal to approximately 50% of the debtor's average monthly cost of utility services, which is approximately $110,000, into a segregated account. We are not aware of any existing defaults, and we plan to pay all post-petition amounts to the utility companies when due. We are also seeking the approval of certain customary adequate assurance procedures, which sets forth a streamlined process to address any request for additional adequate assurance. So unless Your Honor has any questions, I will respectfully request that you enter the order as revised at docket number 130.
Anyone wish to be heard in connection with the utilities motion? It was really nice to the United States trustee. Really, thank you up front. I like that. Was a good strategy there. I reviewed the proposed form of order and the utilities motion. It's been properly served and noticed for today. The form of order is customary in our district, and the proposed form of adequate assurance is appropriate here. So I'm going to grant the utilities motion.
Thank you, Your Honor. Really appreciate it. So continuing forward, I would like to go to the creditor matrix motion, which is at agenda item 10, docket number 5. At this motion, the debtors request authority to file a consolidated creditor matrix and consolidated list of the debtors' top 30 largest unsecured creditors across all the debtors instead of on an individual basis. Additionally, the debtors seek to redact certain personally identifiable information of creditors who are natural persons. And lastly, the debtors are seeking approval of the notice of commencement attached to the motion as Exhibit 1 and authority to mail a single notice to the parties listed on the creditor matrix to advise them of both the commencement of these Chapter 11 cases and the 341 meeting. Unless Your Honor has any questions, I will respectfully request that you enter the order attached to the motion at docket number 5.
Yeah, I'm going to just ask, does anyone wish to be heard in connection with the creditor matrix motion? I find it's customary in our district. I've reviewed the proposed form of order. Based on the declarations that are filed in my review, I'm approving the motion. It's approved.
Thank you, Your Honor. Moving on to the last item on our agenda, the schedules motion, which is at agenda item 11, docket number 6. As Your Honor is aware, the typical requirement to file schedules and statements is within 14 days after the petition date. By this motion, the debtors request a 44 to 45-day extension on the deadlines to file the schedules and statements. The proposed extended deadline will be May 12, 2023. Similarly, on the 2015.3 report, the debtors are asking for extension to the later of either 15 days after the 341 meeting or May 12, 2023. Unless Your Honor has any questions, I would respectfully request that you enter the order attached to the motion at docket number 6.
Yep, it's approved. But I have to give you one warning, Mr. Payne. There are some judges on my floor that will ask you a bunch of questions about this. So don't take me as the softie that just got this through. There are some judges that will just ask you a bunch of questions. I'm just a nicer version of the folks on this floor. So be prepared for anything is fair games. Utilities, taxes, anything is fair game with some of these judges here. So there's one named Jones that you got to look out for, but you'll be well prepared for him if you ever have to stand in front of him, because you know he's going to ask you questions. So, but I've reviewed the schedule's extension. I think it's appropriate under the circumstances, and I am approving it. And I'm signing the order right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Honor. So that concludes my presentation to the court and all the items of the agenda. So at this time, I will turn the podium back to my colleague, Mr. Potter.
Thank you.
Actually, back to Mr. Herman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just for the record, Brian Herman from Paul Weiss. That concludes our agenda. I would like to extend thanks once again to Your Honor. I know this is I've never sat in your shoes, but I can imagine it's never easy to get a bunch of documents dropped on you on an emergency basis and to get through it and be as prepared as you were for today's hearing. And so I very much appreciate that on behalf of the debtors. I know that Mr. DeVoe, who is sitting with me, and Mr. Preschlack, who I've been emailing with, both very much appreciate Your Honor's diligence and time today. In addition, I would also like to thank the United States Trustee's Office for working with us to make this a very smooth hearing, and really all of the parties that worked with us to get to this point. And unless Your Honor has any other questions, I think that concludes the at least our portion of the hearing for today.
Okay. I very much appreciate it. It makes my life a lot easier when there's a great presentation and great papers that are drafted, and I very much appreciate all the statements that were made. I think they've given me everything I need to know about where things are, where the debtor intends to go, and some things that may come up. So that's all I really need to know for today. Anything else we need to talk about today? Does anyone wish to be heard about anything today? On anything else? Okay. Mr. Herman, if anything comes up, or if anything comes up, anyone knows, they're just a phone call or an email away to my case manager, and we'll get right to you. So, alrighty, let me just go up and down the conference call line here, Mr. Herman. If not, I will thank everyone. Alrighty, everyone's adjourned. We're adjourned. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. You too.